Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling confused, drained, and somehow wrong about everything you thought you knew? Have you ever found yourself apologizing for things you didn't do, defending positions you don't hold, or questioning your own memory of events that just happened? If so, you've likely encountered one of the most dangerous psychological predators in human relationships, the covert manipulator. But here's what makes this so insidious. Manipulation doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with warning labels or obvious red flags. The most skilled manipulators are often the most charming, the most convincing, the most seemingly reasonable people you'll ever meet. They don't attack you directly. They disarm you completely. What if I told you that there are specific patterns, specific techniques, specific psychological weapons that manipulators use so consistently that once you learn to recognize them, you'll never be fooled again? What if understanding these patterns could protect not just you, but everyone you care about from psychological predators who see empathy as weakness and kindness as opportunity? Carl Jung understood that the human psyche has both light and shadow, and that some people become so identified with their shadow that they lose all connection to their authentic self. These individuals don't just have manipulative tendencies. They become manipulation itself, using other people's emotions, needs, and vulnerabilities as tools for their own psychological survival. Today, we're going to decode the manipulator's playbook. We're going to understand not just what they do, but why they do it, how they do it, and most importantly, how to protect yourself from becoming their next victim. Because knowledge is power, and understanding their game is the first step to refusing to play it. The most dangerous thing about psychological manipulation is that it's designed to be invisible. Unlike physical abuse, which leaves visible marks, manipulation leaves psychological scars that no one else can see. And unlike obvious aggression, which triggers your natural defenses, manipulation disarms those defenses by appearing reasonable, caring, or even loving. Manipulators are psychological shapeshifters. They study you like a scientist studies a specimen, learning your vulnerabilities, your triggers, your deepest needs and fears. They become whatever they need to become to get what they want from you. With empaths, they become wounded souls in need of healing. With achievers, they become admirers of success. With caregivers, they become helpless victims in need of rescue. But here's what most people don't understand about manipulation. It's not just about getting what they want in the moment. It's about restructuring your entire relationship with reality. The goal isn't just to win an argument or get their way. It's to make you doubt your own perceptions, question your own judgment, and become dependent on their version of truth. Carl Jung spoke about what he called psychic infection, the way one person's psychological state can contaminate another's. Manipulators are masters of psychic infection. They don't just lie to you. They make you complicit in the lie. They don't just gaslight you. They teach you to gaslight yourself. Consider this scenario. You confront someone about their hurtful behavior. Instead of acknowledging the hurt or taking responsibility, they immediately flip the script. Suddenly, you're the one who's too sensitive, overreacting, or misunderstanding their intentions. Before you know it, you're apologizing for bringing up your legitimate concerns and comforting them for the pain your confrontation caused them. This isn't accidental. This is a carefully orchestrated psychological maneuver designed to accomplish several things simultaneously. It deflects responsibility from them, makes you doubt your own perceptions, positions them as the victim, and trains you to avoid confronting them in the future. The most skilled manipulators operate like psychological surgeons. They make precise cuts to your sense of reality, your self-worth, and your autonomy. But they do it so skillfully that you don't even realize you're bleeding until you're already weakened beyond recognition. They use your own empathy against you, making you feel guilty for having needs, selfish for setting boundaries, cruel for protecting yourself. They weaponize your compassion, turning your greatest strength into the tool of your own destruction. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of manipulation is how it creates what psychologists call learned helplessness. Each time you try to assert yourself and are met with manipulation, you learn that resistance is futile. You begin to anticipate their reactions and modify your behavior accordingly. Eventually, you stop trying to resist at all. This is why people often ask, "Why didn't you just leave?" Or, "Why didn't you stand up for yourself?" They don't understand that by the time the manipulation is obvious, your capacity to resist has been systematically undermined. You're not dealing with a healthy brain, making clear decisions. You're dealing with a traumatized brain that's been conditioned to prioritize survival over thriving. The manipulator's ultimate goal is to become the sole authority on reality in your relationship. They want to be the one who decides what's true, what's reasonable, what's acceptable, and what's not. They want you to stop trusting your own perceptions and start relying on theirs. They want to become the lens through which you see yourself and the world. And the most tragic part? They often succeed. People who have been systematically manipulated often lose touch with their own inner voice, their own intuition, their own sense of what's real and true. They become psychological refugees in their own lives, cut off from their own emotional homeland. To protect yourself from manipulation, you need to understand the psychological landscape of the manipulator's mind. What drives someone to become a master of psychological control? What internal world creates the need to dominate and distort other people's reality? Jung understood that manipulation often emerges from what he called the wounded narcissist, someone whose authentic self was so damaged in childhood that they developed a false self built entirely on control and superiority. For the manipulator, other people aren't separate individuals with their own rights and needs. They're extensions of themselves, tools to be used for psychological survival. The manipulator's relationship with reality is fundamentally different from yours. While you generally assume that truth is something to be discovered and shared, they see truth as something to be created and controlled. While you believe that relationships should be based on mutual respect and authenticity, they see relationships as zero-sum games where someone must dominate and someone must submit. This creates what psychologists call object relations. The manipulator relates to people as objects rather than subjects. You're not a person with your own inner world, your own needs, your own right to autonomy. You're a source of supply, a tool for regulation, an object to be controlled and consumed. But here's what's crucial to understand. This isn't usually conscious. Most manipulators don't wake up in the morning and decide to destroy someone's sense of reality. Their manipulative behaviors are often unconscious survival strategies developed in response to early trauma or neglect. The manipulator learned early that authentic connection was dangerous, that vulnerability led to pain, that the only way to get their needs met was through control and deception. They developed what Jung called a false self, a carefully constructed persona designed to get what they need while protecting their wounded core from further injury. This false self becomes so dominant that the manipulator often loses touch with their authentic feelings and needs. They become addicted to the feeling of control because it's the only thing that makes them feel safe. They become dependent on external validation because they have no internal sense of worth. They become compulsive in their need to be right because being wrong feels like psychological death. Understanding this doesn't excuse manipulative behavior, but it helps explain why manipulators are so skilled at what they do. They've been practicing these techniques since childhood. They've had to become psychological experts in order to survive. They know how to read people, how to find vulnerabilities, how to exploit emotional needs, because their own survival has depended on these skills. The manipulator's toolkit is vast and sophisticated. They use what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, giving you just enough positive attention to keep you hooked while withholding it often enough to keep you desperate. They employ gaslighting, systematically making you doubt your own perceptions and memories. They utilize projection, accusing you of the very behaviors they're engaging in. They master triangulation, bringing third parties into conflicts to validate their position and isolate you. They perfect love bombing, overwhelming you with attention and affection to create dependency. They weaponize silent treatment, withdrawing all communication to punish you for not complying with their demands. But perhaps their most powerful tool is their ability to identify and exploit your specific psychological vulnerabilities. If you have abandonment issues, they'll threaten to leave. If you have guilt issues, they'll make you feel responsible for their emotions. If you have self-worth issues, they'll alternate between building you up and tearing you down. The manipulator also understands something that most people don't, that good people are often the easiest to manipulate. If you're empathetic, they'll exploit your compassion. If you're responsible, they'll make you feel accountable for their problems. If you're forgiving, they'll take advantage of your willingness to give second chances. This is why manipulation is so effective against empaths, caregivers, and other naturally giving people. The very qualities that make you a good person, your kindness, your understanding, your willingness to see the best in others, become the tools of your own manipulation. Jung observed that the shadow often contains our greatest gifts turned destructive. The manipulator's emotional intelligence, their ability to read people, their understanding of human psychology, these could be tremendous gifts used for healing and connection. Instead, they become weapons used for control and exploitation. Now let's examine the specific techniques that manipulators use to control and confuse their targets. Understanding these patterns is crucial because manipulation relies on your lack of awareness. Once you can recognize these techniques, they lose much of their power over you. Gaslighting is perhaps the most insidious form of manipulation. Named after the 1944 film Gaslight, this technique involves systematically making someone doubt their own perceptions, memories, and sanity. The manipulator will deny things that happened, insist things happened that didn't, or reframe events in ways that make you question your own experience. They might say things like, "That never happened," "You're remembering it wrong," "You're being too sensitive," or "You're imagining things." Over time, you begin to doubt your own memory and rely on their version of events. This is psychological warfare at its most sophisticated. They're not just lying to you, they're teaching you to lie to yourself. Projection is another powerful technique where the manipulator accuses you of the very behaviors they're engaging in. If they're being dishonest, they'll accuse you of lying. If they're being manipulative, they'll say you're trying to control them. If they're being emotionally abusive, they'll claim you're the one being abusive. This serves multiple purposes. It deflects attention from their behavior, puts you on the defensive, and creates confusion about who's actually doing what. You end up spending your energy defending yourself against false accusations instead of addressing their actual problematic behavior. Triangulation involves bringing third parties into your relationship to validate the manipulator's position and isolate you. They might say things like, "Everyone thinks you're overreacting. My friends all agree with me." Or, "Even your own family thinks you're wrong." Often, these third parties don't actually exist or haven't said what the manipulator claims they said. The goal is to make you feel like you're alone in your perceptions, that everyone else sees things the manipulator's way. This creates doubt about your own judgment and makes you more likely to defer to their version of reality. Love bombing is the practice of overwhelming someone with attention, affection, and promises in order to create dependency and lower their defenses. The manipulator will shower you with compliments, gifts, and declarations of love. They'll make you feel like you've found your soulmate, like you've never been understood or appreciated the way they understand and appreciate you. But love bombing isn't genuine love. It's a calculated strategy to create what psychologists call a trauma bond. The intensity of the positive attention creates a powerful emotional high that becomes addictive. When the manipulator later withdraws this attention, you'll do almost anything to get it back. Silent treatment is a form of emotional punishment where the manipulator withdraws all communication and affection to punish you for not complying with their demands. This isn't just ignoring you. It's a calculated psychological attack designed to trigger your abandonment fears and force you to submit. The silent treatment is particularly effective against people with attachment issues or abandonment trauma. The fear of being left alone becomes so overwhelming that you'll apologize for things you didn't do, accept blame you don't deserve, and abandon your own needs just to restore the connection. Intermittent reinforcement is perhaps the most addictive form of manipulation. The manipulator alternates between positive and negative treatment in unpredictable patterns. Sometimes they're loving and attentive. Sometimes they're cold and cruel. Sometimes they praise you. Sometimes they criticize you. Sometimes they're available. Sometimes they disappear. This creates what psychologists call a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement, the most addictive form of conditioning known to psychology. You never know when you'll receive positive attention, so you keep trying harder and harder to earn it. You become addicted to the highs and terrified of the lows. Emotional blackmail involves using your emotions and relationships against you to get compliance. The manipulator might threaten to hurt themselves if you leave, threaten to take away something you value if you don't comply, or threaten to reveal your secrets if you don't do what they want. They might say things like, "If you really loved me, you would," or "After everything I've done for you," or "I guess I'll just kill myself since you don't care about me." They're essentially holding your emotions hostage to control your behavior. Boundary violation is the systematic erosion of your personal limits and autonomy. The manipulator will test your boundaries constantly, pushing a little further each time. They'll ignore your no, dismiss your concerns, and gradually train you to accept unacceptable treatment. They might start by showing up uninvited, then reading your private messages, then making decisions for you without your input. Each violation is presented as caring, love, or concern for your well-being. Before you know it, you have no boundaries left at all. Reality distortion involves creating an alternative version of reality, where the manipulator is always right, always the victim, and always justified in their behavior. They'll rewrite history, deny obvious facts, and create elaborate explanations for why their clearly problematic behavior is actually reasonable or even noble. They might claim that their jealousy is actually love, that their control is actually protection, that their abuse is actually discipline. They create a parallel universe where their dysfunction becomes virtue and your healthy responses become pathology. Understanding these techniques is crucial because manipulation relies on your confusion and self-doubt. When you can name what's happening to you, when you can recognize these patterns as they occur, you regain your power to respond consciously rather than react unconsciously. The impact of manipulation extends far beyond your relationship with the manipulator. It affects every aspect of your life, every relationship you have, and every decision you make. Understanding these broader effects is crucial for recognizing the full scope of manipulative damage and beginning the healing process. One of the most devastating effects of manipulation is what psychologists call reality distortion. When someone systematically undermines your perceptions and memories, you begin to lose trust in your own ability to assess situations accurately. You start second-guessing every instinct, every feeling, every observation. This creates a profound sense of uncertainty that extends to all your relationships. You might find yourself constantly seeking validation from others, unable to trust your own judgment about people and situations. You might become hypervigilant, looking for signs of manipulation everywhere. Or conversely, you might become naive, unable to recognize genuine red flags because your warning system has been so damaged. Manipulation also affects your relationship with your own emotions. When someone consistently tells you that your feelings are wrong, inappropriate, or excessive, you learn to distrust your emotional responses. You might find yourself apologizing for having feelings, minimizing your own pain, or becoming completely disconnected from your emotional life. This emotional disconnection is particularly dangerous because emotions serve as an important information system. They tell you when something is wrong, when your boundaries are being violated, when you're in danger. When you can't trust your emotions, you lose access to this vital protective information. Your relationships with others also suffer because manipulation teaches you unhealthy relationship patterns. You might find yourself attracted to other manipulative people because their behavior feels familiar. You might become manipulative yourself, having learned that this is how relationships work. Or you might become so afraid of being manipulated again that you can't form close connections with anyone. Manipulation also affects your sense of self-worth and identity. When someone consistently tells you that you're too sensitive, too demanding, too much, or not enough, you begin to internalize these messages. You start to see yourself through the manipulator's eyes rather than your own. This can lead to what psychologists call learned helplessness, the belief that you're powerless to change your situation or protect yourself. You might find yourself staying in unhealthy relationships, accepting unacceptable treatment, or failing to advocate for yourself in various life situations. The manipulator's goal is often to create what Jung called psychological dependency, a state where you become so reliant on their version of reality that you can't function independently. They want you to need them to interpret your experiences, validate your perceptions, and make decisions for you. This dependency can persist long after the manipulative relationship ends. You might find yourself unable to make decisions without extensive input from others, constantly seeking reassurance about your perceptions, or feeling lost without someone to tell you what to think and feel. Manipulation also affects your ability to set and maintain boundaries. When someone consistently violates your boundaries and then convinces you that you're wrong for having them, you learn that boundaries are selfish, unreasonable, or unloving. You might find yourself unable to say no, unable to protect your own interests, or feeling guilty whenever you try to take care of yourself. Your professional life can also be affected. You might find yourself accepting poor treatment from bosses or colleagues, unable to negotiate for what you deserve, or struggling to assert yourself in workplace situations. The skills you need for professional success, confidence, assertiveness, clear communication, are often damaged by manipulative relationships. Perhaps most tragically, manipulation can affect your relationship with your own children. If you've been taught that your perceptions are unreliable, you might struggle to trust your parental instincts. If you've learned that setting boundaries is selfish, you might have difficulty providing appropriate structure and limits for your children. You might also find yourself either overprotecting your children because you know how dangerous the world can be, or underprotecting them because you can't trust your own ability to assess threats. You might struggle to model healthy relationships because you're not sure what healthy relationships look like. The good news is that recognizing these patterns is the first step toward healing them. When you understand how manipulation has affected your life, you can begin to consciously rebuild your relationship with reality, with your emotions, with others, and with yourself. Recovery from manipulation requires what Jung called re-individuation, the process of reclaiming your authentic self from the false self that was created through manipulative conditioning. This involves learning to trust your own perceptions again, reconnecting with your emotions, rebuilding your sense of self-worth, and developing healthy relationship skills. Now that you understand how manipulation works and the damage it can cause, let's explore how to protect yourself from becoming a victim. The key to protection isn't just recognizing manipulative techniques, it's developing the internal strength and clarity that makes you an unsuitable target for manipulation. The first line of defense against manipulation is self-knowledge. Manipulators are experts at finding and exploiting psychological vulnerabilities. The better you know yourself, your triggers, your needs, your fears, your patterns, the harder it becomes for someone to use these against you. Jung emphasized the importance of what he called conscious living, the practice of paying attention to your own psychological processes with curiosity and objectivity. This means noticing your emotional reactions, questioning your assumptions, and staying connected to your own inner voice even when others are trying to drown it out. Develop what psychologists call emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, while also recognizing and responding appropriately to others' emotions. When you're emotionally intelligent, you're less likely to be swayed by emotional manipulation because you can distinguish between your own feelings and feelings that are being artificially induced. The second line of defense is boundary setting. Healthy boundaries are like a psychological immune system. They protect you from harmful influences while allowing beneficial connections to flourish. Manipulators specifically target people with weak or non-existent boundaries because these individuals are easier to control and exploit. Learn to say no without guilt, explanation, or justification. Practice phrases like, "That doesn't work for me," "I'm not comfortable with that," or simply, "No." Remember that no is a complete sentence. You don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting yourself. Establish consequences for boundary violations and be willing to enforce them. If someone consistently disrespects your boundaries, be prepared to limit or end your contact with them. Manipulators will test your boundaries constantly, and they need to learn that violations have real consequences. The third line of defense is reality testing. Manipulators rely on your willingness to doubt your own perceptions and accept their version of reality. Develop practices that help you stay grounded in your own truth. Keep a journal where you record important conversations and events. This helps you maintain an accurate record of what actually happened, making it harder for someone to gaslight you. Trust your gut feelings. If something feels wrong, it probably is, even if you can't articulate exactly why. Seek outside perspectives from trusted friends, family members, or professionals. Manipulators often try to isolate you from other sources of reality testing. Maintaining connections with people who know and care about you provides a crucial check against reality distortion. The fourth line of defense is understanding manipulation tactics. Knowledge is power, and the more you understand about how manipulation works, the less effective it becomes against you. Study the techniques we've discussed. Learn to recognize them in real time, and practice responding to them consciously rather than reactively. When someone uses gaslighting, remind yourself that your perceptions are valid. When someone projects their behavior onto you, recognize the projection and refuse to accept responsibility for their actions. When someone tries to triangulate, remember that their claims about what others think may be fabricated. The fifth line of defense is developing what Jung called psychological sovereignty, the ability to maintain your own sense of self regardless of external pressures. This means knowing who you are, what you value, and what you will and won't accept in relationships. Cultivate a strong sense of self-worth that doesn't depend on others' approval or validation. When you know your own value, you're less susceptible to manipulative tactics that rely on making you feel inadequate or unworthy. Develop your own support system of healthy relationships. Manipulators often target isolated individuals because they're easier to control. When you have a network of supportive, healthy relationships, you're less vulnerable to manipulation and more likely to recognize unhealthy patterns when they occur. The sixth line of defense is trusting your instincts. Your intuition is a powerful protective mechanism that can often detect danger before your conscious mind recognizes it. If someone makes you feel uncomfortable, confused, or drained, pay attention to those feelings, even if you can't explain them logically. Learn to distinguish between healthy discomfort, which comes from growth and challenge, and unhealthy discomfort, which comes from manipulation and abuse. Healthy relationships might challenge you to grow, but they shouldn't make you question your sanity or doubt your worth. Finally, remember that the best defense against manipulation is often simply walking away. You don't have to engage with every person who tries to manipulate you. You don't have to prove that you're right or convince them that they're wrong. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply to disengage and protect your energy for healthier relationships.